Many thanks to our speakers for being here tonight. You can click the link in the chat box for their bios. Our moderator is Alexandra Merceron, a strategic communications professional with over 20 years of experience in the field. She is a lecturer in discipline of strategic communication at Columbia University. Alexandra is also executive vice president at Rubenstein Strategic Communication. She has moderated a few panels for us, and we're so grateful she could kick off our Women's Summit with us today. Now over to you, Alexandra.
Thank you so much, Kate. Super happy to be back. One, because of the caliber of the panelists tonight, but also because of the timeliness of this topic. To say that the last 18 months has changed the way employees and employers approach hiring is an understatement. So I'm thrilled to introduce our panel, who will enlighten all of us on the changes that we're facing. So in no particular order, starting with Rob Barnett. He is founder and CEO of Rob Barnett Media, author of the book, Next Job, Best Job, When We All Need to Read. Rob is a headhunter, management executive, author, podcaster, and entrepreneur. As founder of Rob Barnett Media, he's discovered, hired, and led hundreds of talent creators and executives in senior management roles at MTV, VH1, Audible, and Amazon. Prior to that, he was president of programming at CBS Radio, founder of My Damn Channel, one of the early online networks. And representing diverse careers, companies, and opportunities, his aim is to inspire people to define and sell their best professional brand. Also joining us tonight is Netta Dobbins, founder and CEO of Memconnect. Netta is a values-driven entrepreneur whose work equips diverse professionals with the support they need. And it's born out of her own experience, one that many of us, including myself, have experienced, being the only Black person at the table in various corporate settings. In response, she's founded Memconnect, which is a great digital community and resource hub for multicultural professionals. Definitely take a look. Prior to founding Memconnect, Netta had a long career in media. She's worked in entertainment PR, working for entities such as Clive Davis, PBS, Sony, Airbnb, and many others. So welcome, Netta. Also joining us tonight is Mary Noonan. She is the Vice President of Talent Strategy and Development at ABC News. Mary heads up both recruiting for on-air and off-air talent, as well as developing ABC News's employees, talents, and careers. Prior to joining ABC News in 2014, Mary was a senior producer at CNBC in the long-form unit, where she oversaw and produced one-hour documentaries for prime time. She's also the director of talent development at CBS after a long career as a producer and correspondent for groundbreaking news programs, including 48 Hours, 60 Minutes, West 57th, and Night Watch. So welcome, Mary. And then last but not least, Sinan Siddhar is director of news talent recruitment at Hearst. He is a former television reporter, producer, and news director himself, and currently leads their recruitment efforts nationwide. He has worked in various newsrooms across the country, including in Houston and Cleveland. And for Hearst, he's managed news organizations in New Mexico, Vermont, upstate New York, and Savannah, Georgia. He's been part of many award-winning editorial teams that have won Edward R. Murrow Awards, the Walter Cronkite Award, as well as awards from the New Mexico Association of Broadcasters and Associated Press of New York. So no shortage of expertise in the room tonight to help our audience navigate the new hiring landscape. So I want to jump right in. Usually we like to start by just having everyone in their own words tell us a little bit more about the current work that you do and what brought you into your current job. I'll start with Netta.
Hi, everyone. Super excited to be here. So my journey is a little different. I am originally from Nashville, Tennessee. The more I talk, you'll start to hear my accent. And I moved to New York City originally to work in entertainment PR. Did that for a couple of years, like get me out of here and transition into advertising. And throughout both of those career paths, while I had the opportunity to sit at some amazing tables and work on some amazing campaigns, I always found myself as the only person of color, the only woman, the youngest person in the room. I'm not even from here. So many different things that could have made my situation an isolated experience. So instead of just kind of dealing with being the only, what I aim to do is start a community of people who look like me, who had some of the same experiences as me. And thus my company, Memconnect, was born because I realized that my situation wasn't an isolated one. And there was a need for a platform that really helped propel the careers of professionals of color. So that's what I'm doing here today. I made myself a CEO because I saw a demand in the market.
Definitely we'll have more questions about your role there. Thank you. I'll go to Mary next.
Hello, good evening. So my current role in terms of, sorry, Alexandra, in terms of the way things are now.
Yeah, tell us a little bit more, just in your own words, about your day-to-day. What are some of the major initiatives that you're working on in your role in talent development?
Okay, so right now, my day-to-day is spent both home and I'm going into the office a few days a week, which has been kind of great, actually. And we are still doing what we did before 18 months ago. Now we're just doing a lot of it on Zoom in terms of hiring people. I actually managed to hire 7 or 8 on-air people via Zoom, and then, which is a little scary, but it's so far so good. And same thing with off-air as well. So we transitioned pretty well. I think now we are starting to miss the collaboration, and I think what's been hard is the sort of strategy of it all. So you can hire a lot of people, but then the sort of next steps for the people that we're hiring, that part feels like it's not so much slowed down. It's just the collaboration of, because if you're talking to one person, maybe you're not talking to 2 people. And so anyway, that's the part I really, really miss. I'm hoping to get back to that in person.
Yes, those microtransactions that we all didn't realize were so valuable until we lost them for 2 years. How about you, Sinan?
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for coming and thank you for having me. I really started, was always part of the Hearst Television's college recruitment team. And then as we started acquiring some stations that required, beyond that, I was involved in that. And now eventually that evolved into this corporate job. Mostly my days are looking for both people in front of and behind the camera. It is a challenging time, as we all know. There's a tremendous amount of demand and not that much supply. And it's just been, look, the best part of my day is really just helping connect people. And if they get a job, that's a great day. And that's really the best part, is where you can connect people and put them in a situation they want to be in an opportunity where they can grow. Our company really strongly believes that your growth as a journalist, as a person, et cetera, is reflected in our ability to grow. So it's tough, but it's just really rewarding. And I hope to make some more connections today.
Oh, I'm sure you will. People are firing up their LinkedIn as you speak, but we'll come back to some of the specifics in terms of things that have changed in the hiring process. How about you, Rob? Tell us your journey in your own words and what your day-to-day entails right now.
Well, first of all, thank you for this invite. It's great to be with you guys. And according to the numbers, we have a whole lot of people participating, which is great. So the best thing I can say to all of you as a headhunter is that this is one of the best moments ever for a job seeker. The world has turned, as we know, upside down several times in the last few years, but we went from 41 million people filing unemployment at the beginning of COVID to the moment that Sinan just referred to now, where it's tough to find the best candidate for the right job because there's so much going on. I started my career in 1492 in the radio business. I worked in radio for a long time. I then moved to television and had a great career for about a dozen years during the glory days of MTV and VH1. Then I ran CBS Radio. I was president of programming for a while, did online video, did podcasting. And then all of a sudden, after a long and wonderful career, I got to a place that I decided to give a funny name. I called it #IBJA, standing for IBJA, in between jobs again. And in 2018, I tried to get my next job and found it incredibly frustrating. I made a short video about my predicament one morning. I said, look, it shouldn't be this hard to get a job. Let's help each other. And I posted it on LinkedIn and Facebook. It got 16,000 views and 600 comments. So I realized I had struck a nerve. And after doing videos for about a week and a half, a gentleman called and said, look, I need to hire a chief operating officer for my company. Are you a headhunter? Is that what this is? And I said, yes. And then I Googled the rest of it. And honestly, about 4 years ago, found a mission to do nothing less than help as many people as possible find not just the next job, but the job they really want. So we have a company that does that and a book that does that, and happy to answer as many questions as we can get to tonight to help people find their way to the role that they really want.
Thank you, Rob. And that book is strategically placed in the corner of your screen, which we all appreciate. So let's dive in, right? I said at the start of this, right, the last 18 months has completely upended the job search process. Better in some ways, more difficult in others. So I want to talk about networking and meeting professionals. There's 92 people here because they see this as a way in. So I'm going to ask this question of all of you. I'll start with Netta as the CEO of a networking platform. What advice do you have for students and early career professionals in terms of networking and connecting in this virtual environment we're in?
Mm-hmm. So my thing has always been to find communities where you have a central point or central interest and network with them there, right? Everything's digital. There's a Facebook group, there's a LinkedIn group, there's a Slack group for almost everything now, especially for early career individuals, right? So find those groups, be a part of them, check in on a weekly basis. I also encourage everybody to do digital coffees, right? I know before, when everyone was hitting people up on LinkedIn, sometimes they will respond, sometimes they wouldn't, because we're all doing a million things, right? I think the world has slowed down a bit, and it's easier for someone to turn on a camera and talk to you for 15 minutes than to get on the train and meet you at a coffee shop and then go back to their day job, right? So don't be afraid to connect with people on LinkedIn and ask them something simple like, hey, can we have a 15-minute chat? Within those chats, though, I think it's super important for you to say, okay, what am I wanting to get out of this? And what can I also give to that person, right? You have to make sure that everything you're doing is mutually beneficial, because that's how you establish real relationships where they're going to think of you in the future and you could potentially think of them in the future as well. So to recap, find a group where you have a central interest. Don't be afraid to hit people up on LinkedIn, and then make sure you know exactly what you're looking for and how you can be beneficial to them as well.
Agreed. And I think people are also a little bit more generous now than they were 2 years ago, right? They understand the struggles that job seekers have, and they're willing to spend a little time. How about you, Sinan? You and Rob were talking about LinkedIn, maybe generally about networking, but also how you're using LinkedIn in your work.
I can go first, Rob. Sorry about that. Sorry, I have something weird appeared on my screen. My apologies. Look, I absolutely echo everything that Netta said. I will tell you that LinkedIn is sort of the fire hose of jobs. That getting out there, getting a profile, and I presume I dropped it in the chat for all of you to connect with me. You never know. It just is, there's so many recruiters and so many people on that particular platform searching, and absolutely what Netta said is you make a connection. You can have a 15-minute conversation, either in their chat function or on the phone or via Zoom or whatever. It really is the place where you can effectively stalk people like all of us. And I think you really can't undersell it. And it's really surprising how many early career people don't necessarily do that, just because it's just not that. it's just not that necessarily well publicized outside of the recruiting community. To continue to echo on the thing, look, there are about, I think it's 10.4 million open jobs in the country, and 7.4 million people are unemployed. So that delta of 3 million is very much in the favor of people looking for work. And I cannot tell you how important I think it is for you to think about what's your value proposition? Like, what are the 3 or 4 or however many things that you're looking for at a place of employment? And what we tell our recruiters is you have to present what makes you special or what makes this particular job special. And frequently, you'll mesh, and sometimes you won't, and that's okay. Just, I'd say, keep the relationship professional and friendly, and because you never know. But those are kind of where absolutely what she said. There literally is a group for everything on every platform. But I'd start at LinkedIn. I really would.
That's great advice and a good segue to my shift of the question for Rob. Your advice on networking, but also to Sinan's point, how can students successfully build a long-term relationship with you and cultivate a relationship beyond that job that may or may not pan out?
I think it's really important for everyone to realize that if you're on a job search right now, you've got to make a shift in the way you're using social media from the fun stuff, the personal stuff, to the professional you. A lot of people have a hard time with concepts like marketing yourself and selling yourself. It is essential to put the professional you on as many social media platforms as possible. But to echo what my fellow panelists are saying, LinkedIn is the Super Bowl. LinkedIn is home base. And it's important to not just connect to as many people as you possibly can there, but post there. Post some interesting, relevant things about the lane that you're in. I also want to give a note to everybody thinking about how you're presenting on LinkedIn, to think about what your ideal career title is. It's important to try to focus who you are on LinkedIn, because as hiring managers, headhunters, recruiters, and all the people that do what we do looking for you, a lot of people tend to make this error. They do the butcher, baker, candlestick maker, marketing, business development, sales. I just would really ask you to think long and hard, first in your heart and then in your mind, about what it is you really want to do, and make sure you're presenting yourself as a focused professional on LinkedIn and not as a Jill of all trades.
Absolutely, right. Making sure that your profile really reflects who you are, and that you're keeping that up also as your career evolves. Mary, I'll ask you the same question in terms of your advice on networking. Just particularly, you mentioned the importance of not making those interpersonal and sort of face-to-face connections. How have you sort of compensated for that, and what advice do you have for our panel?
I think going beyond LinkedIn for a second, I think that at a place like Disney or ABC News, there are jobs posted pretty frequently. And so that is actually a place to network in a way. So if your name starts to get recognized by the talent people, like I work on the news side of talent. There is a HR side of talent acquisitions, and they're a little bit the first line of defense. But if they start to recognize your name, not that you should apply for every single job, because you also get recognized for that, and that's actually not a great thing to be recognized for. But let's say you're gonna apply for something at ABC News specific to World News, if there's a PA or an entry level at World News, and then you are a person that like does a little digging, and you see, okay, this person's the senior producer, or I've seen this person on a panel. You figure out their email, you say, I saw you on a panel, just so you know, I applied for that job. Like when that happens to me, I then forward that to the talent acquisition people and say, give it up for this person who did a little digging, because it is the news business. And like, I think, let's give this person kind of a little extra look. Because I do think if you are, that's who we want, right? We want people that are going to dig. We want people that are self-sufficient. And And so that is in some ways a way of networking yourself, is just sort of getting on the radar of some people in both talent and talent acquisition.
Definitely, right? More than just the sort of the generic connection. Do a little homework, make more of an authentic connection. Great advice. Shifting gears a little bit, in terms of early career and students just starting out, what advice do you have? I'll ask this question of Rob, for students with very little experience. We have a lot of students who are going after that first job. What advice do you have for closing that gap?
Yes, thanks. That's a great question. Well, the first thing is, of course, internships. It is so important to get your feet and all of you, your head, your heart, your soul, into as many situations as possible in companies where you can either get school credit for it or start in the most junior role possible, but try and get in as an internship, paid or even unpaid, because the most important thing you could do at the beginning of your career is find mentors. I'm not a big believer in robotic algorithms and cover letters and resumes that all sound like they're written by the same person, to be found by a search engine, to be in a pile of 700 resumes. It's always about human people. It's always about finding somebody that will give you that leg up that you need so importantly at the beginning part of your career. I also would say one other thing. The phrase transactional relationship sometimes gets a negative connotation. I would say there's nothing wrong about being direct and just coming right to the point on LinkedIn and asking people, when there is an open job at a company that you see that you're interested in, go ahead and reach out to people on LinkedIn and be very specific and very transactional about your ask. Say, I'm hoping for an introduction to a person at your company that will interview me for 30 minutes. And I'm going to say something that'll probably get me in trouble with some of you. Try to get to the hiring manager. Try to skip past all of us recruiters and HR people, because that can kind of slow the process down. So I would just encourage you to use everyone that you know to try to get to an introduction to the person that's actually making the decision.
Very smart advice. Drilling down even further to interviews, Sinan, I'd love to hear your thoughts on video interviews and what you look for and how you've approached interviewing differently, given the fact that we're all trapped in Zoom.
Yeah. The key thing is, I think it's just you want to have, we want to have a relaxed conversation with any candidate, right? So we can explore the job, your level of experience or interest, and your skill set, and what we're offering. I mean, the basic stuff is you still have to treat it like you're showing up at the office. I'm not necessarily you need to tie up or anything like that, but how would you do for, at minimum, sort of a business casual thing, if not actually going in person. I'd also just like to bounce a little bit off of what was said earlier with the resumes. I understand the challenge that you may have had with internships. They may have been virtual, especially for you folks in early career. Really mind what you did in your classes. And the reason this comes to mind is I was talking to this young man who was attending the University of Georgia. He's a December graduate. And as he started talking about the things that he learned, and specifically he was talking about that as part of their student news organization, he was involved in repackaging content that they had established on social media. And, like either reformatting tweets or upgrading them onto TikTok, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that was nowhere on his resume. And I sort of sat there, I went, hang on, can you explain to me what you did? And we spent 10 minutes where he sort of walked me through this fascinating process. And I did tell him, I was like, you got to figure out how to put that on your resume. Like, just because you were, and I'm very, very sympathetic. I mean, I've been trying to go to colleges for the better part of a year now. I understand that people are like, it's the automatic thing, right? Like, look for an internship, but really take a critical look and maybe talk to your professor or whoever, people in the industry, like with the connections that I was talking about, being like, hey, this is what I did and this is what I learned. And figuring out how to do that. Because, you know, regardless of the amount of jobs we have to fill, they're always going to look for somebody who has that particular advantage and skill. And then, of course, in your video chats, because you gotta bring that stuff up right out of the gate. Like Rob said, it's still pretty transactional because, quite frankly, there's so many jobs. They're just trying to get there's so many jobs to fill. They're just trying to be like, what do you know? Who are you? This is where I have jobs. Okay, and if you can get those critical elements that set you apart out early in the in a video interview, it'll be a very relaxed and free-flowing discussion. I hope that answers the question.
It does. I tell my students this every semester. Ask your professors, what is the practical application of what I just learned? Have them talk you through a couple of bullet points that you can use when you go to interviews. And the onus is on educators as well as students to make sure that people understand the market value of what they're getting in the classroom. So it's excellent advice. Mary, I'd love to, speaking of going back to the office, I'd love to get your take on what does going back potentially look like at ABC. Many of our students in the audience have never been employees working in an office face-to-face.
So it's going to look, it's going to, I think what Disney's going to look like is a few days a week. It's definitely not coming back full throttle for the time being, but we are having interns back. We do have, the other thing at ABC News is we have fellowships for which it's just a little bit more of like an AP and associate producer level. But those guys are going to be coming into the building, which is super exciting. And so I think they're going to try to get people in where they can. I think there's what I think is kind of nice is I don't sense there's a huge hierarchy where in the beginning of the pandemic, before they kind of knew how, I think before they thought we were going to, before they and any idea we're going to be out this long. I think the fact that now we're bringing people back, it doesn't feel like, well, the top people get to come back and the other people don't have to wait their turn. It does feel like there's going to be some combo of just scheduling it so that people feel like, you know, they're also invited or they're part of decision making and stuff like that. So I feel like has been a bit of a change. It's going to be kind of up to managers, but that's not, again, not about a level, that's about a schedule. Like you can come in this day, that person comes in that day. So it's happening. And I think for people who haven't been in an office before, it's, you know, even before the pandemic, I would say, I mean, in terms of just literally physically, like wear your best. You know, you may get to the office and you may feel a little overdressed, and then you can dial it back as the time goes on, but don't show up assuming like it's post-COVID and we're all in a casual, we're allowed to be in our sweatpants because that's what we are, you know, at home, party on the bottom. But like, so I would come in as professional and dressed as possible. But that's just a small little thing, but I mean, that's what I'm doing. When I'm going back to work, I'm going dressed. First of all, I missed it. And second of all, I'm going, I have the clothes in my closet and that's where I'm going, you know?
It's one thing, but it's emblematic of a bigger thing, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yep.
And then get to the office and learn the culture, right? Just absorb everything and learn, right? It's going to be a new experience and lots to absorb. I want to shift gears a little more positively to the things that have come out of the pandemic. I think probably the best thing to come out of this last 2 years has been this bigger shift to diversity being a critical part of the conversation. Talking about workplace culture is an important part of the conversation. And I think what employees are looking for now is not only the best job, but one where they can be their authentic selves. So I want to talk a little bit about both diversity and sort of, again, bringing your authentic self to work. And Netta, I'll ask you, what is your advice to, again, early career folks who value diversity, who really care about culture, entering the workplace for the first time, and how can they be their authentic selves and hopefully add to the culture?
Yeah, I think what Mary said is super key. And I think that sometimes when we come into an organization, we put our foot down and we're like, we're ready to change the culture, but you don't even know the culture yet, right? You don't know what's expected of you. You don't know how people are interacting. So the first thing I would suggest is go in, just like Mary said, dress to the nines, understand the culture, understand your role, get good at that, right? As you spend time, a couple months within the organization, you'll start to see, okay, here are things that, I'm super excited to be a part of, or here are things that I want to change within the organization. You have to remember that you have to put in your sweat equity before you can voice things that need to be changed, right? So always make sure, put your best foot forward first, and then let's think about ways we can change the culture if there needs to be a change in the culture, but you have to understand it. Two, almost every company I have worked with or am working with right now are making DEI strategies, launching employee resource groups or initiatives focused and catering to increasing inclusivity, equity, and diversity within the workplace, right? Make sure that you're involved in that as well. It's easy to go to work and do your job and want change, but not be a part of the other extracurricular things happening internally. Make sure that you're going in there and you're making yourself heard, and you're also participating in those initiatives as well. So I think that's super key when it comes to helping be a part of DEI, helping to create DEI internally, and helping to make sure that your voice is heard as a person of color. Last thing, sorry. Once you have established yourself internally, don't be afraid to speak up, right? Like, if we know that you're capable of doing your job, we want to hear your opinion. We want to know if, this is going to be offensive to people or if it's not, right? Be comfortable doing that. I think that once again, companies are implementing these strategies and they're listening more and more. So that's your opportunity to really be a thought leader as well.
Absolutely. In some cases, we rely on our young staff to be champions for certain issues, because we know they're the most passionate, they're the most involved, they're the most active on certain platforms. So you do bring unique expertise by nature of you being new and by nature of you being early career. So it has value for sure. Sinan, I'll ask you the same question. And if there are any examples of specific initiatives where Hearst gets early career folks involved in diversity and culture.
Yeah, a lot of what Detta said. We do have employee resource groups in our company where they do specifically try to get people of all levels of experience, because it's a lot. There's a lot of evolving sort of attitudes and approaches, right? People who've been in a workplace or in a work environment for 30 some odd years will have a very different look than people who are in, year 1, 2, or 3. Just to further along what and a lot of what Netta said really was really right on. I also think you got to ask, it is important for you to establish like your value and your cred in the organization as part of people hearing you, hearing your contributions. But I don't think you should also be afraid to ask in the interview processes, what's the person who's trying to employ you, what their values are. What are they trying to do? What efforts are they particularly making? I think that's a fair question. And again, it's a direct question, and I'd be surprised if I'll openly acknowledge, like, we're headed in the right direction for obviously on-air representation and in gender and race and all sorts of groups. But just this morning, we were addressing some of our employees and being like, the representation in management, in key decision making, upper decision making, is a work in progress. We have a long way to go. If you are involved in science and technology jobs, meteorologists for the TV type, but who have you? There isn't a company involved with the STEM jobs, science, technology, engineering, math, that isn't looking at their workforce and trying to diversify, whether it's Apple or Microsoft or Google/Alphabet. And you should ask about that, and they should try to address that. I could go through our list of projects and initiatives and things like that, but I think I'll just defer the time at this point.
Yeah, it makes total sense, right? Whatever the initiatives are, every organization is looking at these issues. Every organization is launching programs. It's a great opportunity for early career folks to get involved. And as Netta said, to speak up, right? And sometimes speaking up is asking questions. There's value in being someone who asks great questions. It's a great way to make an impression, right? You seem curious, you seem engaged, and it helps the organization, right? Recognize what's important. So we're going to shift to questions in a few minutes, but I have one last question for everyone. selfishly, I'd love, Rob, for you to tell us a little bit more about either good examples or some ways you think students could really define their personal brand, whether virtually or in person.
Well, I just take one half step back for a second to the issue of diversity, and then we'll get there on standing out. Look, as a person that went to approximately 17,000 corporate town halls in media companies of the past about diversity, inclusion, and these issues were a lot of talk and not a lot of action. You're now, if you're entering the workforce in your early years, you're entering at a time when it has finally become real. And as a headhunter, I can tell you that we cannot do a search that doesn't present candidates from every walk of life. The world has finally started to wake up in a real way, and thank God it took way too long. As far as standing out, I'll go to one topic that I think really, really matters here, and it's the cover letter. The cover letter, when you reach out to a company looking for employment, tends to look like it was written by the same person, and it uses a lot of the same language, and cover letters oftentimes have this me attitude. What I wanted to suggest to people that are looking for a better job right now is to make sure that the cover letter has as much, if not more, about the companies that you're pursuing than it simply does as a repetition of what's going to be on your resume and your LinkedIn. The people who really take the time to study everything they can about the company that they're pursuing and come with a point of view about what you see at that company and what's speaking to you as an individual about the work that that company is doing is going to make you stand out more than 90% of the other people who are pursuing companies for jobs that are just, again, kind of doing the whole, here's what's on my resume. So I think a combination of a really compelling cover letter, and then even if it's for 5 minutes a day, a professional post on your social media of choice. Primarily, I would still recommend LinkedIn, but secondarily, perhaps Twitter, depending on what lane of media you're in. If you're in journalism, journalists live on Twitter. It's a great place to be seen as somebody with a real expertise and point of view about your subject matter. If you're in journalism, do it on Twitter. And with that, I'll give you back the Zoom floor.
All great advice. I love it. Mary, similarly, question just for you. What skill set do you look for? What are the top things that are absolute must-haves as you're evaluating on-air and off-air talent?
So I think that I do think, going back to sort of one of the original things we talked about is internships. I think that we really honestly, for the network, aren't going to hire someone that's never sort of been in a newsroom environment. And even if it's at a competitor's, that's obviously totally fine. So I think a skill set is having been able to kind of carry yourself, learn things in an internship. One thing I was going to say, which is a little off brand of your question, Alexandra, though, going back to, it's a little having to do with skill set and people's brands. I always ask candidates what they do besides try to get job, what they're doing on the side, like what they do on weekends. What do they do, maybe as it maybe relates to the job, but also just what are their hobbies, stuff like that. Because I do feel like if people are sometimes they have, you can tell when you're in an interview with someone that it's the same thing they just said to NBC and it's the same thing they said to CBS. It's their favorite network. And it's like, I know you said that to the other people that you've interviewed with. So I do try to catch them off guard a little bit and say, like, well, when you're, if you're not working or if you're not intern, what do you do? Because I do think there's a lot of, it's very interesting to see what people are, what their other focus are. I mean, I met a woman last year during the pandemic, and I asked her that, and she said that she was learning how to DJ in her spare time, and I was like, check that. I'm like, that's we need. I just thought that was such a, like, taking the initiative and figuring out how to DJ, and had never done anything before, and I thought that was just something about it. I just love that. And we hired her. I mean, she's a great candidate anyway, but it was just, I don't know. I like to hear initiatives outside of just work stuff.
And it had nothing to do with your love of DJing, right? It's just
No, I mean, I don't even I don't know. Yeah. I did. There was just it was the initiative part that, you know what, I'm trying to find a job, but in the meantime, I'm going to kind of side hustle and figure out how to DJ. And I thought that I just thought, like, okay, that person's figuring it out.
Yeah. And to the point Rob made, it's an opportunity to show another side of yourself that's not cookie cutter.
Yes.
And there's value in that if people take an interest.
Mm-hmm.
Netta, please tell us more about Memconnect. I told you my students, we're all stalking you now. So tell us a little bit more about the platform and how the audience can use it.
Yeah, so Memconnect is actually a two-sided platform. On the B2C side, we have a digital community where professionals of color can hop on, connect with each other, because we're all about creating access to one another. We also produce workshops and masterclasses, all focused on career advancement. So not only are you able to network with people who have some of the same lived experiences, but we're also giving you content and workshops told with a nuance of what your life in this position may be, right? And then on the B2B side, we help companies, once again, recruit, retain, and develop diverse talent. So not only are we giving you access to each other, we're giving you access to job opportunities at some of the top companies that you may not have previously been able to get your foot in the door at. And then we're going inside internally to make sure that they are creating and truly creating, like Rob said, diverse, equitable, and inclusive spaces, teaching them how to actually hire diverse candidates, what they're looking for, et cetera, et cetera. So I like to say that we're attempting to create a 360 platform where we can be a one-stop shop for diversity, equity, and inclusion for companies and for people who look like me.
I was just going to say one-stop shop for all of the connections on both sides, which is really smart. So I encourage everyone in the Zoomosphere to go and take a look and sign up if you can. So our last question, and she just dropped in the link. Last question I'll send to Sinan. Why is local media a great place to start a career? As a lover of regional and local media, I would love to hear your take on that for our audience.
Sure. First of all, I think regardless of the platform and regardless of the scope of your platform, there's many things that are changing. The things that are true are the things that are true in terms of telling a good and compelling story or putting together a good and compelling product, right? Relatable, interesting characters, interesting facts, visuals, all those things. In the case of local, I mean, a lot of the network people, there's a good number of network people that came through local, and the thing that local will allow you to do is that it will allow you to connect to a space and a community much more quickly and get into that skill growth while you're telling the stories of people in a specific area. Whether it's like in my resume, it was like whether Houston, Cleveland, lived in Vermont, lived in New Mexico, you get to sit there and tell the eternal truths that you would also tell at Netflix or what have you. But it's where you're able to hone your skills in a place where you get to know and meet people and know the community. And you're a part of the fabric of the community, quite frankly. I mean, when, there's certain people in every single market that when they roll up to a scene or a news conference or what have you, people immediately gravitate to them. And if you've done a good job, they might be able to sit there and acknowledge you. I mean, when I was a reporter, I remember that's basically how I started getting stories. They're like, oh, you did that thing on that such and such. Yeah, come here, I got something to tell you. And then so you work and you build your way up and grow. And that's the whole point of it, right? You want to do something that you enjoy, that you can make a difference, and you can continue to grow at. And I think local really does help in that way. Referring to the other question of the two pieces of advice I have for you is just really simple. Look and listen. look at what they're selling as the job, like read the job description, look for the skill sets that they're looking for or that you may have that are adjacent to it, look into what the company's doing, look into what they need, and listen. Generally, the interviewer, if you're listening very carefully, gives away what they're looking for. If they just keep talking about, I don't know, Adobe Acrobat Reader or Adobe Creative Cloud, you have a pretty good idea. You know, they will continually they're fishing to see if you have it. So if you look, which is basically research and pay attention and listen during the interview process, and then pivot or reveal all your skill sets.
Yeah, get those points that connect with what the recruiter is looking for out quickly, right? Keeping in mind that you're probably having dozens of conversations and that interview is one of them, and it's all the more important for them to take that advice. Thank you all so much. We're going to open for questions now. For those who are asking questions, please say your name and what school you're from. And who do we have first?
Hi, first off, I just want to thank everyone for participating today. It's very insightful, very much needed for everyone, including myself. My name is Naima. I am from Brooklyn, New York. I graduated from Brooklyn College and I am working in the marketing agency at the moment. I'm still pretty early on in my career. So I wanted to ask more on the onboarding and initiatives for people of color, specifically for Black people. Through my current experience, I've realized how much I value being reflected across the board, not having that scenario of being the only Black person on my team or even in my department. So I would like to know, what are the initiatives? How are y'all diversifying your work environment so that everyone is welcome, safe, seen, and heard?
I'll throw that one to Mary. Maybe talk a little bit about what ABC does for onboarding.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, one thing we do when we hire for whatever position it is, there's always going to be a slate of a mix of people. They're not going to move forward actually with interviews until they have a kind of a full slate of of diversity and gender as well. I think in terms of onboarding, I don't think we're onboarding different. If we hire people, there's no difference between the people of color and non-people of color, how we're onboarding people, right? Everybody kind of comes in the same way. But I think once the person is in the job, I think that they will find that we've made many more strides in terms of management, so that they are looking at people in management positions and boss positions that look more like them. So we've made a real serious effort. I mean, the president of our news division is a Black female, and we've made 3 vice presidents or senior vice presidents hires of people of color during the pandemic. So I think that there is a pretty good, again, once you're sort of in the building, but there's a pretty good, when you're looking up, you're seeing people that you're more familiar with.
And applying their previous advice, right? Reach out to people, introduce yourself to people to definitely help speed things along.
Yep.
All right, thank you, Very. Our next question comes from Fabiana Hernandez. Fabiana, what's your question?
Yes, hi. Well, my name is Fabiana Hernandez. I'm a sophomore student at Verve College. And my question is, as a woman and as a person of color and as an immigrant who wants to build a successful career in marketing in the media industry, which is a male-dominated field, it can be very easy to feel dismissed or invalidated. This even happens very often at my current job, which is just a server. So I just would like to hear your advice about how can I ensure my voice is being respected, knowing that I'm also respectful to others.
Great question. Netta, I'm going to toss that one to you.
Great question. And I'm going to be real with you. It's going to take time, period, right? I think it goes back to what I was saying earlier. You have to establish yourself within an organization before you can demand that people respect you and listen to you and do all that. Everybody should come with a certain amount of respect always. But as an intern or as an entry level person, there are things that you have to learn before people are just going to be like, "What's up? What you got to say?" Right? And that's just facts. That was my experience. That's a lot of experiences of people of color that I know. One thing that I did when I started my career is I felt I was in the same position. Right? I was like, I have all these ideas and nobody's listening to me. I got smarter. I started bringing data to validate everything that I was saying so that no one could say that's just an opinion. Actually, it's not, because 90% of blah, 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 right? I think that anytime someone is disagreeing with you or pushing back, if you have the data to support it, they can no longer do that. So that's the tactic that I use. And then third, if you're not the only person of color and there's like a small cohort of people with you and you're in a meeting and you feel like you're talking and people are talking over you, or they're not listening, or they're repeating what you said. Some women in the Obama administration actually did this, but they were like, "Oh, Netta just said something similar in that she said da 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 da," right? So have people who support you in the room point back to each other and make sure that, I heard you say that. I don't know if they heard you say it because they're saying it again, but I'm going to make sure that they heard you say that, right? So it's all about establishing that support system, whether they look like you or not, right? Because interns are a community too, right? And they could all be feeling like no one's listening to me. So I say those are my two keys and kind of what worked for me as I navigated my own career.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
Great question and great answer. Thank you, Netta. Our next question is from Paula Ospina. Whenever you're ready.
Thank you for the great panelists here tonight. My name is Paula Ospina, and I'm currently a photojournalist in Jackson, Tennessee. So my question is, as someone who is currently employed, what's your advice on taking the next job to gain experience, but not knowing if it will put you in the path you want to be in?
Ooh, I'm going to throw this question to Sinan, and Rob, maybe you could answer this as well.
Just one quick question, Paula. Are you mostly working with video or are you mostly working with stills?
Both stills and video.
Perfect.
But the newspaper mainly here is focused on stills, and I want to move towards video. So that's why I'm looking to pivot.
I would absolutely and I'm not obviously the TV guy is going to say this, but if you think of it, everything is video, right? You are actually in a really good spot because you probably have a DSLR and all that. So if you think about any digital platform, literally anything from broadcast to digital to anything is just continually pushing wherever you can into that space. You have very much the right idea. But if you think about it, who isn't shooting video right now? Like, you go on Zillow, somebody's got a video of somebody's house. You're talking about B2B communications. You're really actually in a space, because even though you may think that, oh, I'm working at a newspaper and that faces its challenges, right? There are the elements there, right? People are still going to need a story. People are still going to need visual images, visual support. It may not look like it looks like right now in the newspaper industry 5-10 years from now. It may not look in any of these industries like that. But you have the capacity and you're in the spot where if you just leverage and push yourself in a few other areas, I think it could get you in spaces you want, whether it's in journalism or marketing, it's really, insurance companies are hiring video photographers and videographers. Because I know we lost one to an insurance company where I was like, what? There are things. It may not look like your next job may not look as adjacent to what you are doing currently now, but I take hope and really encouragement in the fact that you're at this touch point. Like, that's the great thing about journalists and people in communications. Like, they're at what some of us call crossroads jobs. Like, you intersect with so many people in so many parts and so many places, right? You're with lawmakers and business people and regular folks and this and that and the other thing. All these opportunities converge because people come to you for their stories, for what's going on. So you're at this point of convergence. Maybe that's a better version of calling it instead of crossroads show. You're at this point of convergence where you're getting data and information from all other places, and you're trying to make that data and information relatable to a bunch of other people. And regardless of whether or not you're telling that on a tablet or a television screen or a phone, that skill set, that hasn't gone out of style in millennia. It's just changed in how we've done it.
Rob, anything to add on making an effective pivot?
Yes, thank you so much, Paula, for asking this. The pivot question is one of the questions that we're asked all the time. And, you know, the real estate on your LinkedIn and your resume, that real estate belongs to you. You don't need anyone else's permission to present yourself the way you want to be seen on those two essential documents. So what I would advise all of the people listening to us tonight is that if you want to make a pivot from one position to the next, go ahead and start doing some projects independently on your own. As Sinan just said, shoot some video, put some stuff together, and then put that experience that you're doing right now on the top of the resume in the LinkedIn. We call it hang a shingle, right? Paula, insert name of company here. My dumb company name is Rob Barnett Media. I didn't need anybody's permission to go out there and say I'm headhunting, nor do any of you need permission to go start shooting the kind of video that you might want to do next, so that a future potential employer will look at the top of the resume and see the relevancy and the recency of you doing the work that you're actually pursuing. Thanks for the question. It's great.
Yes, that's definite question that everyone will revisit throughout their own career. Our next question comes from Jenna Bauer. Jenna, what's your question?
I'm Jenna Bauer from Brooklyn College. I'm a television, radio, and emerging media major. And my question is, so I've been on LinkedIn a lot myself lately. Actually, I'm seeking out internships for the winter and spring. And for some of them, they have a link to the application site, and sometimes they want a cover letter optionally. So my question is, do you think it's more effective to introduce yourself via a cover letter, or to introduce yourself via a message to the recruiters on LinkedIn? Like if you can find access to the specific recruiter, especially if it's like a startup instead of like a big company like Disney or CNN or something.
We have big company folks here, but I'll throw that question to Mary, and maybe Sinan, if you have anything to add. And Netta?
I think both. I think if it is a option to do a cover letter, I would do one. I would do it tight, small, not do too much, just to kind of get attention, and then I come at them in another direction, come at them in LinkedIn also, because again, like kind of what I was saying earlier, I think the name recognition is really helpful. It's like, oh right, I remember that person, and again, they showed initiative by coming at me in two ways.
Annetta, anything to add? I mean, you're sort of in between. Who's on the platform connecting?
So on both people, to answer your question, on the platform, it's mostly for candidates of color, but employers hop on too. I think when it comes to reaching out, I prefer, as a startup and as like just a recruiter, I prefer LinkedIn quick messages over cover letters and random emails, because one, it may go to my spam. Two, if it's not written well, I'm already going to be like, I don't know. But if you send me something short, concise on LinkedIn, I can go to your page and I can say, okay, well, they have experience in all of this stuff and they may be a fit for this role over here. So that's what I suggest, especially for like smaller companies and startups and things like that.
Yeah, my question about which one I meant is, are they usually the hiring managers or the HR folks? And honestly, both are good to connect with, right? You want to make an impression with both. Our next question comes from Monisha. Monisha, what's your question?
Hi, I'm Monisha. I am a grad student at Fierstein Graduate School of Cinema, which is part of Brooklyn College. I know Mary was talking about like reaching out to recruiters and doing that extra step of digging to talk with people, and how that's very helpful. And I was just wondering if you guys could provide a little advice or insight on how we could do that without crossing the line of it being too much, you know what I mean? Because I think that's something I struggle with, is like wanting to reach out to recruiters or people involved, but also not wanting to be like, you know, the line between being assertive and proactive versus like being kind of annoying and like pestering. So I was just wondering if you guys could provide a little insight about that.
I was coming to you, Rob, the balance between persistence and peskiness.
Yes, I'll give you a thought, Monisha, about this. You know, in my own career for a long, long time, when I was in between jobs looking for the next one, you know, in the before times, before we were all living in the boxes, I would say to people, can we have coffee? Can we go out for a drink? Here comes the other one that people say all the time. Can I pick your brain? Or, you know, can we have a general conversation? Can I get on your radar? I don't think that any of those things are the good move. I think those are the things that you don't do. What I recommend is that when you see an open role at a company that is specifically geared to where you want to be, and it's got some of the experience that you've had so far in your journey, learning and hopefully interning, that's when you pounce and don't hold anything back. You know, instead of asking for a general chit chat, just say, I've seen this open role. I really would love a 30-minute interview. Here's my information. Thanks. Just be crazy direct. But I would advise to sort of drop the, hey, can we chat for the heck of it? Make it very specific to when you see the opening, and then any parts of yourself in the mirror that are shy, say bye-bye and go, 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 go.
I want to add on to that too. Remember that recruiters have a job. Their job is to get people hired and to fill these roles. So just as much as you're looking for them, they're looking for you, and you're making their life a lot easier if you have the role in mind, if you're qualified for the role, and if you approach them with that proactiveness to say, hey, you know, I think I'm a fit for this role and I would love to interview for it. So I think that sometimes as women, especially women of color, we have imposter syndrome around it too. And we're like, oh, we don't want to be aggressive. This is the time to do it. Everybody's hiring. It's the great resignation. You're going to make everybody's lives easier. I also have a rule of 3, right? So reach out, introduce yourself, do a follow-up, one last follow-up. If they do not respond to you, not interested, move on.
Just one last thing to echo. Thank you about mentioning that they have a job. Like, man, if they pick your brain, if I let everybody pick my brain, I'd be fired because I wouldn't have gotten anything done. I agree. I think, in fact, I'd even go shorter, like 15 minutes, and be the aggressor. Be like, I need 15 minutes. There's a job in Tampa, making it up, that this is the job, and I think I have good stuff for. Do you have 15 minutes to talk about it? And then send your resume while you're at it. Like if it's on LinkedIn or on top of it, like that sort of burst with intent and aggression, nothing wrong with that. Try 1, 2, 3, maybe 4, and then move on. But I think that's the key thing is like, hey, I'm not going to waste your time. I'm the one. You can stop looking now, and I'll explain it to you in 15 minutes. Pick me. And just to the preceding question, I agree with also what everybody else said. Like, it's just like you just try to hit them on every way. The cover letter, the speaking. This will shock you. I believe I should get in the room and talk to people because I think I could sell them. But it's up to you. It's what you know about you. That's the thing.
Yeah, great advice.
Thank you, guys.
Ask that question a lot, right? How much is too much persistence? So great advice today. Our next question comes from Tracy Carter-Holsey. Tracy, what's your question?
Hi, my name is Tracy Carter-Holsey. I'm a recent graduate from Mount St. Mary University in Los Angeles. And my question is really geared towards Rob. If you could explain a little bit more on how a headhunter works with a job seeker. And then for someone like myself who's transitioning from one role to another, mainly going from unscripted reality and just got my master's in directing, how do you work with a candidate like myself?
Great. So the first thing I would say is that the way that I work as a headhunter is we work exclusively and retain for companies that need us to find the best people for the role. So in our business model, the companies are paying us to find you. We try to give job seekers as many services as we possibly can for free. And I would encourage anybody to find me at robbarnettmedia.com. You can sign up. We do a weekly jobs listing every Sunday. You can apply to anything you want on our website, and we update that every single week with open jobs. As a matter of fact, there's about 12 or 13 open jobs there right now. We're looking for candidates. Go to robbarnettmedia.com. That pivot question again, Tracy, about, the role from one to the next, I think is best done by making sure that you're out there trying to get some of that next relevant experience in the place you want to be, even if it's with friends. My best friend is named Mike. He lives in Detroit. Mike and I have conversations all the time about doing this incredible music series that we want to do in Detroit. Well, my mom raised me to never, ever, ever tell a lie. So if I was out there looking for a job right now, guess what's at the top of my resume? I'm developing a music series in Detroit. It's real. Mom would not be mad at me for telling a fib, because that's something that is really headed towards where I want to be, if I want to be, in this particular case, developing original content. So you are who you say you are, as long as you obey my mom's rule and you never tell a lie.
Make it true.
Thank you.
Great advice. All right, our very last question, although we could go on all evening. We have our last question coming from Shantorian. Shantorian, what's your question?
Hello, thank you so much for advising all of us in coming here tonight. My name is Shantorian and I use she, her pronouns. And I was just wondering, the panel has spoken about contributing any discussions about diversity and inclusion and company culture throughout this conference here. So I was wondering, can you elaborate more on that process, and what steps should we consider if we are asked to share any personal experience, and which cost-benefit analysis should we consider when navigating working on improving company culture?
Interesting question. Let's see. All right, I'm going to go to Sinan with this, and if anyone else has thoughts here, feel free to chime in.
Just for clarity, you're talking about like if you're part of like an employee resource group and you're asked to share?
Yes, correct. So
Okay.
we're asked to share, what should we consider? What steps should we take? How do you go about sharing personal stories at a company? And what sort of advice do you have on navigating that experience?
This is really good. This is really good because it's hard. Here's what I've done. I've always tried to speak my truth and my honesty with awareness of everybody else around me. Like, I'm not going to sit there, just for background, like I'm biracial. So I kind of have this understanding of like, there's going to be, yeah, you frame it in some ways so not to hurt other people's feelings, but you're coming from a place where you want to elucidate what it's like to be, say, biracial, or whatever you want to talk about. And you want, as long as you can keep in your heart and your head that you're just seeking understanding, I'd go for it. Just to be honest with you, like, as you keep it right, you just want people to hear you, understand where you're coming from, without necessarily like shading. Like, I know that's not the right way, like shading where they're coming from. Well, yeah, unless they're coming from, a very unusual place. But you just want them to understand. I think you'd be surprised, and especially in those employee resource groups, and this is only, and I speak only of my experience, is that people are there to learn, to understand. They may not fully understand. And I've had people going like, hey, I'd like to talk to you a little bit more about X or Y. And that requires more patience and more love, to be honest. Just where you're sitting there like, okay, I guess your experience, you've never seen anything like this. Like, I live in Georgia, and about a month and a half ago or something, I was running, not terribly far, about a mile and a half from my house, and somebody yelled something out of their pickup truck. And when I said that to people, as I was telling them, I was like, yeah, this still happens and stuff like that. People are like, what? It still happens? And you're like, Yeah, it does. And sort of walk them into it and bring them in. I don't think you can go wrong if you're trying to just come from a place of, I want you to understand this and I want you to relate to this and make it accessible. I hope that's the answer. I'm not saying you have to soften it, because there are some things there's some hard truths we need to discuss. There's some hard truths we need people to understand. No one's saying that you have to soften up the story or make it more palatable for people. But it's about intent, and generally the room that you're in, if they're sitting there wanting to listen and hear these stories, their intent is also good. They may not get it, but they're trying. And if you just keep that in mind, speak the truth. That's what I got.
It's a great answer that connects things that all of the panelists have said, right? To Rob's point about being authentic, to Netta's encouragement to speak up, right, and find your voice, to Mary's words about showing a different side of yourself, and Sinan's point about being a little bit brave, right? You can always speak your own truth, right? You talk about a cost-benefit analysis, sharing your experience, sharing your point of view as a person who has their own unique view. No one can take that from you. So it might take a little bit more bravery than I think some early career folks are used to, but it's absolutely needed. So on that note, wonderful question. Thank you, Shantorian, for ending us so perfectly. I want to thank all of our panelists. This has been fun. I wish you could all come over and hang out for another 2 hours. Thank you for having me be a part of this panel. And now I will turn it over to Kate to wrap us up.